Hi girlies, welcome back to my channel. It has been so long since I've done a proper sit down video. I just got back from Korea and I'm so sorry about kind of going radio silent. Not only was I super busy about touring wedding venues in Korea, but also I have a couple family members who are unfortunately quite sick, and so my mind was like the furthest thing from YouTube during my entire trip. The Bastia giveaway has now finally been selected. Again, sorry for the delay, but there is an even more exciting giveaway coming up very soon, so even if you didn't win the Bastia, you do have another chance to get something even more exciting. So normally when I come back from a big vacation, you guys know that I always do a massive little shopping haul and share with you guys everything that I purchased, but unfortunately for this trip, not only was I just really pressed on time, I just really wasn't in the mood to shop. I did buy a couple things here and there that I might share on my TikTok, but the one big thing that I actually did get done was something related to me and my own self-care. If you guys have been following my channel, you know that this year in particular, I've been focusing a lot more on investing in my own personal self-care. So not only does that include like skincare, really honing in on my own skincare routine, getting facials and things like that, but also in terms of like really being active and healthy in my lifestyle through horseback riding and golf. So when I decided to go to Korea this year around like 6 months ago, I also decided to do a very popular procedure in Korea, and that procedure was to fix my smile. Now, I really only want this video to serve as a guide and to educate you on what possible treatments are available if you are interested in fixing your smile, because as many of you guys know, Korea is a really hot spot for medical tourism, and typically they have a lot of procedures that aren't even available in the US and that are quote-unquote safer and or a little bit more advanced. So the particular procedure that I got is called Zeronate. It's a ultra thin veneer. So basically what they do is they shave off about 0.1 millimeters off the front side of your teeth, and then they stick on an ultra thin porcelain veneer on top of it, and it can completely even out your tooth color, edit tooth structure, and change your smile entirely. Now, before I go into the nitty-gritty details of everything from start to finish, the cost and everything about this procedure and my final results, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I even got this procedure in the first place. Now, up until this point of my life, I've been pretty adverse to doing any changes to myself. I think that natural beauty is great. You should be proud of the body that you're born with. You shouldn't ever feel like you have to change anything about yourself. The only like body modification that I've ever gotten, I guess, is like a single piercing in my ears. I've never gotten any needles in my face. I've never done microneedling, microblading. I've never touched any part of my body, essentially. But the biggest insecurity that I've always had ever since like as long as I can remember is my teeth. From a very, very young age, I had fluoride staining on my teeth, and honestly, I have no idea how I got it. Nobody around me knows how I got it, but essentially it happens like kind of in the early stages of your life. It's when you ingest too much fluoride, and essentially the enamel structure in your teeth change, and you can develop things like white spots, brown streaks. Like it basically makes your teeth have a really uneven color pattern. And so obviously when I was young, kids don't really have a filter on their mouth, so they always ask like, what's wrong with your teeth? Like, did you drink too much coffee? I was like 8. I'm like, I don't drink coffee. Did you drink too much tea? Like, you have something on your teeth. That was always constantly pointed out to me as a child. And as I grew up, I think obviously adults kind of mind a little bit more what they say, and nobody really commented on my teeth anymore, but definitely starting social media a little bit, and I get a little bit close to the camera, I'm showing off my earrings, I could definitely see my teeth a lot more clearly because obviously I'm putting myself out there on social media. So my self-awareness about my teeth has been a long-standing insecurity. In middle school, I actually inquired about veneers when I lived in Korea, but at that time, the technology still was like pretty new, and I was still kind of growing. I was in 6th grade, I was like 11 or 12, and so they're like, we really don't recommend getting veneers on like child's teeth because you can still grow. And at that point, they were shaving a good amount of teeth off when they were doing the veneers. And then as I got older, I tried things like whitening toothpaste, crest white strips, but fluoride staining usually does not respond to typical whitening treatments because it's actually a change in your enamel structure and not a surface level stain. So I have a dentist here in SF. It's kind of like a nice-ish dentist, I guess, but basically I went in for a consultation and I wanted to get a quote on what they would recommend to give me the perfect smile from an American standpoint. And so when I went for the consultation, they did the little scan of my teeth, and they actually recommended that I first do Invisalign and then do veneers. And kind of what they were saying is that if you want to spend all this money and get the perfect smile, you might as well get the perfect smile. And my teeth honestly are not in need of any correction in my opinion, really. They're relatively straight. I never really had to do any kind of corrections when I was younger. I have some bottom teeth that are like slightly crooked, but generally my teeth are relatively straight, so I really never thought about doing Invisalign. But they said, you know, we could recommend Invisalign, so that was anywhere from like $7,000 to $10,000 if you have insurance that helps cover it. And then they ultimately recommended that I do 10 of my top teeth, because when I smile you don't really see my bottom teeth, so they recommend 10 of my top teeth. And here's the kicker. The price that they charge was $2,500 per tooth. So the overall cost of 10 veneers, 10 top teeth, would have been at $25,000. Plus, if I went ahead with their other recommendation of getting Invisalign, it could have been upwards of $35,000 to get the perfect smile. My dentist also recommended that I do some full cap veneers for some of my teeth because I do have some enamel erosion, partially from grinding my teeth, partially from poor eating habits. The full cap veneers and the partial cap veneers were the same price, so it didn't really matter, but I was just kind of astonished by not only the cost, but also just, I was really scared of getting like that shark teeth that everybody sees on like social media where they literally grind down the entirety of your teeth and just plop on a new tooth on top of it. And that just seemed so unnatural and relatively unsafe. Like, you're sacrificing good parts of your teeth when you don't necessarily have to. So I just felt like they were trying to recommend a little bit of like overcorrection, which some dentists I do believe may lean towards like overcorrecting, some dentists may lean towards undercorrecting, but I took that quote and I was just like, no way am I going to spend that much money on my smile, which it wasn't like that bad. I think from a distance, you can't really tell that my smile was that bad, I think, especially like if you look at photos and my smile actually photographs relatively well. But in person up close, I think you can definitely tell. So I was like, it's just really not worth that egregious amount of money to get a little bit of peace of mind for my own self-consciousness. So then, of course, the next step is always to look at Korea, because Korea is always going to be cheaper, they're always going to be faster, and honestly, they're always going to have better, in my opinion, better service and better treatment. I had previously done a different medical procedure in Korea. I got LASIK in Korea. Well, actually I believe it's called PKR in English. PKR is a little bit less invasive than LASIK, so that's why I ultimately chose to do that. But in America, I was quoted around $6,000 for both my eyes. In Korea, I got both my eyes done for $1,500, and honestly, best $1,500 that I could ever recommend to someone. But because I'm Korean, I am a little bit more familiar with obviously going around Korea, getting certain treatments done. So I felt really confident about being able to do my research and select the clinic that I wanted to go to. So I ultimately settled on the clinic called TU Dentist. They're relatively famous for the Zeronate procedure. I believe they were the first, if not one of the first clinics to bring it over to Korea. I basically did all of my consultation and all my treatments in Korean, but some of their doctors do speak English, so you can request to have a English-speaking doctor. And I did meet one of them when I did have a couple of more in-depth questions for vocabulary I did not know in Korean. Like, I don't know what enamel erosion is in Korean. So they're always on standby and you can definitely request them before you go in. So they are very foreign friendly. I did a good amount of research on Korean websites to just read reviews and, you know, get the whole 9 yards about how people were feeling after getting this Zeronate procedure from TU Dentist. And every single review that I personally read was really good. The only annoying thing about a lot of Korean blogs, and I don't know why they do this, is they're very like dodgy on the cost. A lot of Korean blogs will be like, oh, I got this, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I'm like 90% sure that they're not sponsored or anything, but they never include costs, which I was like so annoyed. But I did find like one blog that said like a relative approximation, but I feel like she might have been sponsored. So I honestly had no idea what exactly the cost was going to be going in, but I had like a ballpark range of what it could have been. So I made my appointment in advance. I did through Kakao Talk, but I think you can also message them on like TikTok or Instagram if you don't have Kakao Talk. And then as soon as I got to Korea, I went in for my first visit because they do need a little bit of time to make your teeth. So I wanted to as quickly as possible to make sure that my teeth were ready before I had to leave the country. So when I went in for my first visit, they took a full 360 scan of my teeth. They took a lot of pictures, like blacking out, you know, my bottom top teeth, getting a picture of my natural smile, getting a picture of like my teeth wide open and everything to make sure that they had like those before pictures, and so I could point out different things that I wanted to be changed about my smile. So once those pictures were taken, the doctor came in to consult with me about what particularly I wanted to change, and obviously number one for me was my discoloration on my teeth. That was the thing that I was most concerned about. I was also though concerned about some of the enamel erosion on my teeth, particularly on my front two teeth. You could see that there was a little bit of transparency starting to show on my teeth. teeth, which is a huge sign of a lot of enamel erosion happening. And so I told her that my American dentist had recommended that I get a full cap veneer on my top 2 teeth, but she was actually pretty against that recommendation because personally for me, I don't have any sensitivity or pain in my teeth, luckily. And so she was saying that's a big indicator that my teeth are still relatively healthy, even if there is enamel erosion. So she really didn't recommend doing an overcorrection, which would be to file the entire tooth down and put a full cap veneer on it when there's still a lot of healthy tooth left. And so she really recommended just doing the very standard Zeronate procedure, which is to shave a tiny bit off the front part of my enamel and then to stick on the very ultra thin porcelain veneers. The next things that we discussed were generally my smile line, if I wanted to change anything structurally about my teeth. So for me personally, I really like my natural smile, thankfully, and there's nothing that's like glaring that I wanted to fix. And so honestly, I said, please give me the most natural, regular looking veneers possible. And so I wanted to keep my smile line exactly the same because some people like a little bit more of a straighter smile, some people like a little bit more of a curved smile. You can change all those aspects with these veneers. You can also make slight modifications to the shapes of your teeth as well. For example, if part of your teeth is jutting out or one tooth is longer than the other, they do all those minor corrections with a little bit more grinding on your teeth. They also ask in particular what shape you want your general teeth to look like because the very standard factory smile of Korea is the whitest smile that you can possibly get. Each tooth is like a perfectly symmetrical mirror of each other, and there's no like lumps and bumps or sharp edges anywhere. So a specific question they asked me was actually, do I want my canines to be a little bit pointy, just a little bit blunt, or perfectly square? Because a lot of Koreans, I guess, like to just have the perfectly kind of straight smile. My canines, and I feel like most people's canines, are a little bit pointy, so I said, please keep them pointy. Please keep my natural tooth structure. I really don't want anything personally about my smile to change. And so my dentist was telling me like, yeah, the Korean people would freak out if they heard what I was saying because they always want like the same smile. But she did say a lot of the foreigners who come in relatively want natural looking smiles. And so she was like, yeah, we'll try to make it as natural as possible. She did recommend a couple of structural changes. So she did recommend like having my teeth be relatively even on the left and right side. So for example, the left canine should be the same length as the right canine. And obviously naturally, my teeth aren't like that, so she said she could just kind of tidy that up a little bit. And then second thing, my front 2 teeth kind of tilted inwards to each other a tiny bit. You really cannot tell, but they tilted in a tiny bit, which caused the outer portions of the teeth, like on this side and this side, to flare out on the outside a little bit. So she recommended that I just trim that down a little bit to make my teeth appear more straighter. And so that would ultimately give me the look of having done Invisalign. We then talked about color, so how white I wanted my smile to be. I can choose from 1, 2, or 3, 1 being the whitest, and then 2 and 3 subsequently becoming a little bit more yellow / a little bit more natural. So I chose number 2 because I didn't want like a blinding artificial smile. Again, I really wanted a natural looking smile. So I chose 2. And then the last thing that we did talk about was actually texture on your teeth. So these little tiny ultra thin veneers that are so thin, they're actually pretty much see-through. They're made, I think, in a machine first, but then they're edited by hand by technicians. And so the technicians can actually add texture to the tooth. So more texture is kind of like a little bit more natural because nobody's teeth are perfectly smooth and perfectly shiny. And so my dentist asked me if I'd like any texture on my teeth, and I said, yeah, I just like a little bit of texture. And she showed me some photos of examples of like no texture versus a little bit of texture versus a lot of texture. And so I just went with like the tiniest amount of texture. And again, Korean people would always pick the whitest, the shiniest, the smoothest, possibly most uniform teeth ever. Again, if you want a more natural smile, you choose a little bit more texture, you choose a little bit of less white. And then the last thing that I inquired about was like, how can I know what my smile is going to look like when all of this is done? Because I think a lot of the times in America, because they do like straight up your entire jaw in veneers, they give you kind of like maybe 3D models, or you could kind of like guess what it's going to look like, or there's a little bit more understanding because maybe you're doing a lot more correction on your teeth. But at TU Dentist, basically what you do is they give you like a book with a ton of people's smiles in it. So it's like the before and after pictures of people's smiles. And you basically flip through the book and you mark certain smiles that you think look good. And so that's in terms of like the color, that's in terms of the smile line, in terms of the shape of the teeth and everything. And you mark those and you tell them to the dentist, and that's what they're going to kind of model for your own teeth. For me in particular, they were like, well, you don't really want to change anything about your smile, so your smile's gonna stay the same essentially. It's just going to get an even white color. And I was like, okay, cool. So that consultation was all done. And so that's kind of like the medical consultation. And then you're moved into a separate room to talk about pricing consultation. So that's a separate person who's in charge of sales. Obviously, they want to sell this to you. So I went in, they gave me kind of like a rundown of exactly what Zeronate is, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to kind of the pricing structure. So I wish I took pictures during this process because I don't remember everything, but essentially each tooth is priced the same. Doesn't really matter what tooth it is. And there are 3 levels of pricing you can choose from. So the first pricing is for a 1-year warranty. So if anything happens to your veneer for 1 year, they will fix it free of cost. Next pricing tier is 5 years. Anything that happens to it, they will fix it. And also the doctor that does it is like a little bit like, is kind of like one of the top tier doctors. And then the most expensive 3rd tier was 10-year warranty. And then the 원장님, or like the head of the clinic, is going to personally do your teeth. And so it's kind of just like you're paying not only for a better warranty, but you're also paying for a little bit more like skilled hands and expertise in that price cost. So I believe, if my memory does not fail me, I believe the first cost was around 800,000 won, I want to say, for each tooth. The second tier, I want to say, was around 1.2 or 1.3 million won. And then the last tier, I think, was either 1.8 or 1.9 million won. I ultimately settled on the middle tier, which she said that most people settle on that one. And so that is the 5-year warranty with one of like the top dentists doing my teeth, which is the same woman I did my consultation with. And then she recommended that I do my top 8 teeth only. And so the total cost for my 8 top teeth was around 10 million won, which when you convert it into US dollars at the price point when I paid for it, which was a pretty good exchange rate, I paid around $7,000. And what's even better is that when you do medical tourism in Korea at these kind of large established clinics, you also get tax refund back. So I got about a little under $600 back in a tax refund. So ultimately my procedure was anywhere between $6,400 to $6,500. Now, if I had done 8 teeth in America at my current dentist, that would have been $20,000. Now, my procedure was relatively easy because I didn't really want to change anything about my smile. I wasn't really making any huge differences in my smile. But if you do want to make big changes to your smile, TU Dentist is super skilled and they can pretty much do anything you ask of them. If you want to get rid of your buck teeth, or if you have to fill in gaps in your teeth, like I have seen on the pictures, like the picture book that they gave me, some incredibly drastic changes in their smile. So it might be a combination of Zeronate plus something else to aid in like the tooth structure, but they can do everything and it's definitely at an affordable price. So once I decided on my mid-tier price point and that I was going to do 8 teeth in total, I went over to the pay counter and paid, because you pay before you do anything. So I paid, and then at that point, I presented my passport so I could get my tax refund receipt. And then they actually do have the tax refund kiosk right there. So you can't get like the cash in hand at that second, but you can just get the credit card refund there. So you just scan your receipt, put in your credit card numbers, and then it will automatically just be refunded back to your card, which is super helpful. So that's just what I did there. And then I scheduled 2 follow-up visits. So the first one was going to be in a couple of days, and that's when they were actually going to grind down my tooth to the appropriate structure that I wanted. And then the last visit was just to place on my veneers. Typically, what they want you to do is also have a follow-up appointment post getting your veneers on in case you feel like anything needs to be slightly edited or you feel uncomfortable. But unfortunately for me, I was actually going to be leaving the country, so I did not get a chance to schedule a follow-up appointment after getting my veneers placed on, but I'm going back to Korea in December, so I will just do my follow-up appointment then. So again, in total, I paid 10 million won, or just a little under 10 million won for the procedure, and then I also had to pay for my x-rays and stuff, which was only, I think it was 33,000 won, which if you convert it into USD, maybe it's like $25. That is for an uninsured individual getting a 360 x-ray scan, all these consultations, pictures and everything, $25. In America, hundreds of dollars. It's so crazy how the US healthcare system works. But anyways, basically, if you ever have a problem and if you can ever make it to Korea, I would just really recommend doing most things there, especially if you are able to speak the language. It's just really helpful. Of course, I do always have to recommend that you do your research anywhere you go, even if it's a super highly recommended vetted place, even the dentist that I'm recommending to you, you should always do your own research, because there's always a chance, unfortunately, something can go wrong. And we have seen things like on TikTok where girls are going blind through various medical procedures. And if you're not familiar with Korea and you're simply a tourist there, it's a really big hassle to sort things out if something does go wrong. So it's really important to go somewhere that you trust. Really don't do anything super major, I would say, in Korea, because you always want to have that fallback plan. And generally just be careful and mindful of your body. So at the second appointment, that's when they actually grind your teeth down. It's super fast. It's just 30 minutes, no anesthesia. You just sit in the chair. It feels like almost like they're scaling your teeth. That's probably the similar sensation. And they're grinding off just the tiniest amount of the top part of your enamel. And then again, because I was making some slight structural changes, they did drill down a little bit on the bottom side of my teeth to make sure that the teeth were even on both sides. And then also, in particularly for my front teeth, they also shaved off a little bit of the outer edges to make my teeth look a little bit more straight. And I do think that they also kind of corrected a little bit for having a little bit more like of an even plane on the front side of my teeth, because I do know that some of my teeth kind of stuck out a little bit more like in this direction. And so I do think that they shaved down a little bit more in those areas where it was particularly noticeable. And that was that. They don't give you anything to put on your teeth. You can request fake teeth, I believe, if you're like really self-conscious, or if you're going through a particularly like larger change, they can give you temporary teeth. But in my case, I didn't have any discomfort. It was totally fine. I'll show you a picture of what my teeth look like after the shaving. You can barely tell that anything has changed. And then I went on my merry way. I had about a little over a week in between getting my teeth shaved and actually getting my veneers. That's about the time it takes to get your veneers made. You can expedite the process by paying more money, but since I was able to wait that long, I just decided to wait what they recommended, which was a little bit over a week. And then when I actually came to get my veneers placed on, this is actually a long procedure. They recommended that I block out at least 4 hours for this procedure, which I was like pretty surprised about. But I understood when I got there, it's because they're super, super thorough about making sure that you're happy with your smile. And it's really nice because these are like ultra thin and they're easily handled by technicians. They can easily make like quick changes here and there. So essentially when I got there, they did a kind of like sanitation and scaling of my teeth just to make sure that the teeth that I'm placing my veneers on are nice and clean. There's nothing there. And then they placed the Zeronate on top of my teeth without bonding it yet. And they showed me what my smile would look like. They asked me if I wanted to change anything. Personally for me, I was like, oh, they look great. Like, I don't really know. But then the head dentist came over and she has a really good eye for detailing teeth. And she was like, oh, this tooth is like a tiny bit crooked on this side. She's saying that one of my front teeth was like a tiny bit crooked and that's not okay. So she sent the tooth back upstairs where they do all their tooth making, I guess, and they had it redone. And I was like, wow, this is really nice, because personally for me, I would have never caught that detail. And then it came back down. She took a look again. She was like, oh, this needs to be slightly changed. I can see that there's like a slight marking here. And then I also saw that like one of my, especially on my front teeth, because these are ultra thin see-through veneers, is something to remember. So your natural tooth is also going to shine through that veneer, which helps with the natural look of your smile, because it's almost essentially just like mimicking your teeth just in like a better state. But in particular for me, because I had a little bit of enamel erosion on my front teeth, there was some transparency that I could see through the Zeronate, and I really didn't like that because it just looked a little bit strange to me. So I pointed out that I didn't want this part to be transparent. And so they quickly did the revision, brought it back down, and it was totally saved. And so all this back and forth, going back and forth, back and forth, finally we've settled on the teeth. I was happy, my dentist was happy, and so they went ahead with the bonding procedure. Super quick, actually, the bonding procedure. I think it's pretty similar to maybe getting a filling or something. They just shine the little UV or whatever in your teeth. They stick it on, and that is that. There will be some bonding residue left on your teeth even after you leave. They try their best to kind of floss it out, but they do say in their little kind of to be aware of guide when they give you before you leave is that when you floss and when you brush your teeth, you might get these kind of like white dust almost that comes off of your teeth. That's just the residual bonding coming off, but there's nothing to be worried about there. So I was super happy with what my smile looked like, and then I actually opted to do professional whitening on my bottom teeth because I was afraid that if my top teeth were beautiful and brilliantly white, that my bottom teeth would be too stark of a contrast in color because my bottom teeth would be more yellow than my top teeth. So I opted to get one round of professional whitening on my teeth. That was also really quick, and I think it cost somewhere around $260, I think, for just one round of professional whitening. I will not recommend the whitening though, because personally for me, I did not see any color change in my bottom teeth. And it could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe I do have fluoride staining on my bottom teeth or something. I've never actually gotten professional whitening, so that was my first time receiving professional whitening. So there could have been a variety of reasons why it didn't really work, but personally for me, I didn't really see any color change, so I kind of regret doing that. But all the same, I think both my top and bottom teeth look really good now. Once my procedure was done, I was told to contact them if I felt any discomfort or pain, but I have not felt any since, and so I haven't had any reason to contact them. Now I want to show you my before and after pictures. Unfortunately, I didn't take any like official before pictures really, or like the dentist did, but when I took a picture on my phone to take a picture of the before photo, the quality wasn't that great. So I did try to find some old photos of myself to show you like my true before smile, but before I get into the photos, I did want to show you just, you know, no edit, no filter, what my smile looks like up close on camera. So this is my smile now. So again, I just did my top 8 teeth because my bottom teeth don't really show when I smile, and especially when I talk, I'm definitely more of a like upper teeth showing talker. So once again, I'm just so happy with how it turned out. There was absolutely no pain or discomfort the entire time because they're basically shaving off a almost negligible amount of my teeth. So no anesthesia is new, there's no pain, there's no fear. They simply stick it on, and as soon as I got the procedure, I cannot tell that there was anything like on top of my teeth. There was no discomfort. It just felt like my regular teeth. And I was so happy about that because I know a big side effect of like getting regular veneers is like a lot of sensitivity or like pain following the procedure. And I was just not about that. So here are my before photos. I'll post them up on the screen. So you can really tell that I had just uneven discoloration. Like my teeth were relatively yellow and I brushed the crap out of my teeth. So honestly, I don't know. Maybe I could have done better as a child and maybe like it was already too far gone to fix some of the natural yellowness that had kind of sat on my teeth for some time. But you can generally tell that my teeth are naturally a little bit yellow. And then particularly I had a lot of discoloration on my front 2 teeth and specifically around like my in-between teeth slash like kind of nearing up towards my gum line. I would have kind of like these dark brown spots that were starting to appear. And then I had like these random like white streaks. Like it was just crazy all over my teeth. I actually did have my family dentist when I was in high school drill out some of the like really bad brown spots on my front 2 teeth and have him fill it, or that's something that he suggested. He was like, this is just like a quick procedure to kind of make you feel a little bit less self-conscious in this tumultuous time of high school. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did have like a little bit of like filling there. So it was also having a little bit of uneven texture on my front 2 teeth. And just generally, you can just see that I struggled a lot with the yellowness of my teeth and then uneven discoloration, particularly kind of towards my gum line. And now my smile is perfectly white and beautiful. And I am so happy because no one has said anything about my teeth since coming back, which means A, it looks natural, right? It doesn't look like I did anything to my teeth, which was exactly what I wanted because I was in constant fear that my teeth were going to be like piano keys. Like there's several like social media influencers and like K-pop idols who've all done like full jaw veneers essentially, and it's so obvious. And they call them like piano keys essentially. It's just so obvious that you got your teeth done, and I really didn't want that look, and I wanted my smile to essentially just be what my smile would have been if I did not have to go through all this fluoride staining and whatnot on my teeth. And also number 2, I think it also points out that a lot of like insecurities that you might have about yourself are definitely elevated in your own mind, because even when I showed Matthew, who was with me in Korea, like my new smile, he was like, oh, it doesn't really look that much different from your old teeth. And I was like, oh yeah, like I think to a lot of people my smile probably wasn't as bad as I initially thought it might be to me, but I'm the only person in my life who lives constantly with me, right? I constantly look in a mirror and I'm constantly aware of when I laugh, I put my hand in front of my face. I was always just so self-conscious about people looking at my teeth and like thinking things about my teeth. And it's definitely something that grows in your head. It's not something that people are probably thinking about me, but ultimately, it was something that had bothered me for quite some time, and I thought that it was time, especially with like my wedding coming up and my photo shoots and everything coming up, that it would be a good time to invest in myself and change my smile. You can see in these after photos now that all of my problems have been corrected. There is a beautiful white even surface on my teeth. I don't think my smile is by any means perfect because I don't even know what a perfect smile is. If somebody thinks a perfect smile is when all your teeth are like the same shape and size, then my smile is definitely not that. But I'm really happy because this is the smile that I've had all my life. I would like to continue having a smile. This is a smile that naturally fits my face and how my lips curve upwards when I do smile. And so I did feel like changing anything that was naturally who I was just going to make me feel really strange afterwards. Now, for the conclusion, am I happy? Do I regret anything? And I can say that I am very happy with the results of my teeth. I think some people might find it silly or maybe a waste of money to spend so much money because I mean, you know, $6,500 or $7,000 is not a trivial amount of money to spend on anything. And so for me to want such a natural smile, some people will be like, well, you spent all that money, like you can't even tell that you did anything to your teeth. But for me, that was the point, right? I was willing to spend more money for a more safe procedure because the enamel is preserved a lot more than other typical veneer procedures. I was able to keep my smile as well as fix all my pain points, which included discoloration and an even texture on my teeth. I sometimes teeter between regretting not getting the very first, like the whitest tooth color actually sometimes because like I said, because the veneer is so thin, your natural teeth does shine through the teeth. So because I naturally had yellowish teeth, I do feel like sometimes in certain lightings, my smile isn't as white as I thought it was going to be. So honestly, I feel like I would have also been happy with the whitest teeth, but also I think I'm very happy with the current whiteness that I have. But I did read on some forums that your veneer color can change a little bit, especially if you drink things like red wine or coffee and stuff like that. So I do feel like getting the whitest one might have kind of been a proactive move in order to prevent like further yellowing of my veneers. But hindsight is 2020. I'm stuck with the color that I selected, which again, I am very happy with. In comparison to the American price point and quote that I was given, I'm quite happy with the price that I got and for that price, what smile I achieved. Well, that brings me to wrap on today's video. I really hope that you guys were able to take away something from this. Again, it's just meant to serve as a guide and just to let you guys know that there is this procedure out there that you can do if you are interested in making any changes to your smile. I think it's really great in terms of price point and it's super non-invasive, which is really hard to find in typical like American dentistry veneers. I was not sponsored in any way to make this video. I did my own research. I selected this clinic. I paid out of pocket for everything. So this is totally my honest review of TU Dentist. And again, I do want to emphasize that you should not have to feel like you need to change anything about your natural beauty. Everyone obviously has their own personal insecurities that are bigger in their own mind than others might perceive. But if you are interested in investing in any procedures in the future, I am very curious to know. So please leave them down in the comments. If you want any recommendations of maybe Korean clinics, I would be happy to try and help you guys out. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll definitely see you in the next one. Bye guys!